Good afternoon, everyone. It's just after 12 noon on Thursday, the 25th of February. My name is Mark Harris, and I'm your moderator today. Now, over the next 8 weeks, we're going to be covering 4 of the hot topics facing the corporate travel sector in the company of some of the best brains in the business. Well, that's what it says on my piece of paper. Today's topic is the long road back, and it's brought to you by TIN in association with International Hospitality Media. Very shortly, we're going to be looking at how quickly will corporate travel bounce back from the consequences of COVID. Domestic travel is predicted to recover quickly, but how realistic are those predictions, and what about international travel? Before that, though, let me take just a couple of minutes to draw your attention to a few other items. Now that the Prime Minister has given strong indications that we may be able to meet face-to-face from June, we're going to be hosting a drinks evening on the 7th of July for travel buyers at Tobacco Dock in London. This is part of our Engage programme for travel managers and has been compiled by them together with accommodation and urban living innovators. You'll all be very, very welcome, and you can find details of how to book those tickets on the IHM website. Now, these events could not take place without the support of our sponsors, who are shown on your screen. Finally, if you like what you see today, at Travel Intelligence Network, we now offer a full or menu-driven service to create and deliver webinars for suppliers and intermediaries. And if that's of interest, just let me know. Now, before our drinks evening on the 7th of July, our colleagues at IHM are running a series of virtual events, again as part of the Urban Living Festival. Full details on your screen now, and I'd strongly urge all of you to support that. Now to the housekeeping protocols for this webinar. By using the chat and Q&A functions on your screens, you can send us questions and observations, which I'll share with the panel as soon as I can. These sessions always work best when questions are asked as we go along, so please get involved and we'll have a fantastic session. We'll be monitoring the feedback throughout, but apologies if it takes me a couple of minutes to get your question shared with our panel. So now to introduce today's panel, and we're delighted to welcome Anna Gibson, a supply manager for the GB for travel at Hilti. Delighted also to welcome Joe Layton, CEO of CAP Worldwide. Lee Whiting, who'll be known to many of you, a former global travel manager. And welcome back to his second of these webinars to Clive Wratten, the CEO of the BTA. So welcome to all of you. So let's talk now about the long road back. As I said at the top of this session, we're going to be looking today at which markets will recover first. Will it be domestic or international? What level of corporate governance is required to support that recovery? What will the drivers of recovery be? And what will business travel bouncing back really mean for us all? We're going to examine and discuss whether companies will cut travel budgets and the impact that will have on corporate objectives, which segments will return first, which industries are recovering most quickly, and what lessons can be learned. A little bit of context for you. It's estimated that it'll take up to 18 months for the UK economy to return to pre-pandemic levels. At the same time, the rate of business travel's recovery is predicted to vary by industry, reasons for travel, proximity of trip destination, and it is estimated it could take up to 4 years for our sector to recover. I'll be very interested to get our panel's view on this. But on the upside, a third of business travellers say that the lack of travel last year demotivated them, and they're very much specifically missing face-to-face meetings. And over half of travellers say that business travel really does engender meaningful human connections. So we need to restore those as quickly as possible. So let's get straight to it, and let's talk about the long road back with our panel. And I'm going to start by saying to Clive Wratten. Clive, are you seeing signs of recovery yet?
Well, good afternoon, Mark. I think it's had earlier. I think what we're seeing is signs of optimism, which will hopefully lead to signs of recovery. Since the announcement of the Prime Minister last week, that it was good to see at least a clear roadmap of what the expectations are. We know the dates could change, and I think there is still some real doubts as to whether all of those we've met. I hope they will be. But talking to the aviation colleagues, they've seen quite a big recovery, clearly from the leisure industry over the short few days as bookings have been coming in. And I think we continue to have to ride on the back of that optimism to give our corporate customers, travellers and buyers that confidence that the ability to travel will be safe, secure and as easy and as frictionless as going to be possible. So I think there's a long way to go. It certainly feels a little better this week than it did last week, but I think there's still an awful long way to go before we can really say we've seen the recovery starting. But I think it's the responsibility of our industry is to grab this opportunity and push it as hard as we can to get that recovery started.
And would our other panelists agree with that?
Yeah, I'd definitely say so. I think there is obviously the need for people to get out there and travel. And there will be sectors and there will be domestic travel returning much quicker. But I think the optimism is there, but the caution outweighs that optimism right now. You as a company, you've got that duty of care to really look after your employees, and you have to make sure that you're doing all possible to keep them safe. That their safety is much more important, and you've had a year to realize that you can still continue business without the same levels of travel.
Joe, Lee, any observations?
I'm happy to come here actually, coming now, Mark. Yeah, for us in the extended stay industry, I would say that for us as an agent, domestic travel has largely continued across the UK for us in many of the sectors. So obviously we're handling some government business, key workers, essential workers, etc. And construction and FMCG have continued to move around the UK. So we've seen, because of the kind of accommodation we're offering, we've seen that as largely continued for us. But since for us in the relocation world, so we work in business travel, but we also work in relocation. And in relocation, there has been, I would say, some green shoots definitely since November, because a lot of people that move first are people that are relocating back into places where new projects are happening, or into new locations. So as people are changing the style of their workforce, some people are still having to relocate across the globe, and we're seeing that definitely, that demand's increasing. And I do have to say, I completely agree with you, Clive. This week we've had some crazy times trying to already book into secondary and tertiary locations, where sometimes we have to use alternative accommodation because people are booking their holidays very, very quickly. So since Monday, it's gone a little bit crazy. And we all know that these are just estimated times of recovery for us. The government's trying their hardest, but they're giving us dates, and people are now using those as definite dates. So there's going to be a lot of challenges that way. But definitely domestically, the rebounds are definitely happening already for leisure. But we would say the major factor for us into domestic travel is now about ensuring that people feel safe and secure, and people get back into offices as fast as they possibly can. That's where the confidence will come with generic travel across the UK, definitely. And Lee, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I don't think I think historically I've been a bit of a bull in these situations, not full of it, but I find myself being more of a bear now. I think a year ago we were all, or most of us would have been at a business travel show, and umming and ahhing as to whether it was going to take place or not, but still talking about what we were doing for the rest of the year. And none of us foresaw what happened, and none of us thought it was going to get anywhere near as bad as it had. And then I think in August time, everyone was feeling a bit more relaxed, and you were able to go out and relax, and all of a sudden it got worse again. And that's, I don't want to be the pessimist here, but I just Clive mentioned this in when we were practicing, when we were talking beforehand. It's obvious we didn't rehearse this, but he was saying about, you know, some testing taking place because of these other variants, and that's the bit that worries me now. Is all we need is a variant that's suddenly resistant to the vaccines, and we're back to where we were. So that's my note of caution. Okay,
so I'm going to come back to Anna now. So within Hilti, how are you guys approaching? What does your travel program look like right now? Focus on domestic, and could you sort of give us a feel for which markets you think will recover first, domestic or international? But if you could start by just sharing with us some insights into how you're delivering travel right now and what for.
So at the moment we still have a travel ban in place, and certainly for anything leaving the UK, it's not happening at the moment. It's not permitted. We do have domestic travel that's stayed. We are in construction, so obviously our account managers are out on the road. Construction has continued, so they need to go and meet with customers in person. We're still classifying them by critical meetings only. We're not doing anything such as internal meetings or training, anything like that face to face. So it's bearing in mind that, you know, we've got a plan of coming out of this, but we're not anywhere near out of it. So the employee safety is absolutely paramount. And I think for me, the R rates and so on would have to be a lot lower before we actually start easing up on that. So domestic is going on. For me, do I foresee European and further afield coming, you know, as of the 17th of May, if it all goes to plan? Not really. I think we do have to be cautious. And speaking to peers as well, I think that is quite very much reflected. There is the appetite there, but it's so uncertain that it's very difficult. So we've implemented a lot of other things where we can hold those meetings virtually now. I think people have also got used to it. I think people, it's not necessarily the traveling for business, but I think it's actually the human interaction that they're missing. It's more, you know, the actual doing the business and the internal meetings and the trainings and so on. They're now used to, you know, we've had a year almost to get used to it.
Okay,
so
before I go to other panelists on this, we've got our first question in, and I'm going to start, Lee, with you on this one. Questions come from Wayne Pollard. Hi, Wayne. Lovely to hear from you. And Wayne's question is, he'd like to know the panel's view on when it does return, what international travel will look like and what it will mean for the business traveller, particularly in and around COVID passports. So, Lee, can I start with you, and then I'll go around the panel for their views, please.
Yeah, thank you. What a great question. Are you sure that was from Wayne? I mean, you know, I don't even know if we know that yet, right? I think one of the things that's going to come out of this more than anything is the enhanced duty of care that companies now realise they have towards all of their travellers. And so you've got to think about all those many, you know, hundreds of touching points on any corporate journey, getting to and from the airport, getting through the airport, getting on the plane, repeating that process at the other end, getting to the hotel, travelling to the office, the situation in the country you're attending, what's it like from a health perspective, you know, and to me that's going to carry on for a very long period of time. And I've got to be honest, as a selfish Brit, when they were first talking about, you know, giving away vaccines, I'm like, why would we do that? And then say, well, actually, if we don't help other countries that haven't got a vaccine, we're never going to be able to go there, right? So I just think this thing, as I said before, needs to be tempered a little bit to make sure that you can go everywhere with impunity and not have to worry about it too much. So to me, that's what's going to change is, and we've already seen it, is companies really realising that their duty of care is not just a catchphrase, it's now something you really, really have to be prepared for, because if anything happens to your traveller when they're travelling on business, I think they'll be coming back to you pretty quickly.
And other panellists' views, please.
Yeah, I agree with you, Lee, actually, and unusually, but I think definitely for international travel to return, Wayne's a really good question. At the moment, length of stay has become quite a big factor, hasn't it? So even if you're coming from the 33 red routes, you're going to spend quite a long time in one particular hotel. But if you're coming from anywhere else, you've still got to spend 10 days in sort of isolation as such. So that's going to have a big impact, because that is increasing costs, isn't it, for any corporate traveller to do a short, what could be perceived as a short trip. It's still going to increase the cost. And I think from my perspective at the moment, the conversations we're having at the level we're having them, the CFOs of a lot of the companies that are actually working alongside the travel buyers now are looking for more stringent management of budgets, Lee and Anna, moving forward. They're kind of thinking, hang on a second, we don't want to spend as much moving forward. So they're creating a roadmap. So even though the country and the globe is trying to do that, every company is trying to create their own roadmap to get out of this, you know, or to get into more acceptable solutions for future. So I think you're right, Lee, it's on risk analysis, on emissions now, definitely emissions. Everyone's realised that they can reduce the emissions through travel, and we're like, listen, but you still need us to travel. Sustainability and budgetary controls. So like from my perspective, a lot of companies, and Anna, and I don't know if you've done this, but a lot of people have paused the ability to self-book as well. And I think that's actually something, as they turn that back on, they're going to be like, can we control where the money's spent and how the money is spent in moving forward by taking away the self-book facility. So that could be a big change for travellers in the future, and be significant for people, because it's like you're managing a project rather than a booking now. You've got to make sure all those things, Lee, that you mentioned, you've got to make sure all those things are in place before you can press book accommodation. So therefore self-booking might be removed and an agent involved, i.e. a TMC or something, just to check everything else is correct before the book button is pressed. So I think there's going to be very different for international travel. Those things are all going to come into play. For domestic travel, slightly less so, but definitely for international travel.
But even with
Anna,
domestic
Clive, your
travel,
thoughts, please?
Yeah, even with domestic travel, we've got additional measures in place. So whilst we are still allowing self-booking through our online booking tool, we've got extra security steps and extra approvals that they need to go through, and a lot more clear reasoning provided as to why there is that need for travel. But I think as travel, first of all, I think we need to look at getting us back into the office before we start even considering going further afield. I've actually just been looking with our insurance in terms of our average trip days. So our average international trip days are about 4 days. So why would we do that when it's actually, you've got a 10-day quarantine? You know, it's exactly as you said, Joe, it's a lot costlier. And you know, what company, you know, there's not many companies out there that aren't needing to save on costs. I think what will happen is we're looking at the reasons for traveling, and we'll also be looking a lot more at the ROI on the actual business trip. Whereas before you took a business trip, a lot of people did take a business trip because it was the done thing. Now you're actually going to be looking at the cost, and the cost isn't just your hotel and just your flight or your rail or whatever. It's a lot more. It's the time out of the office. It's so much more. And then of course, as you touched upon, is that sustainability. But as Wayne mentioned about the vaccines, I think as a company, there's not, you can't impose on your staff to have the vaccine. That is a very, very personal thing. But as we see it, there's going to be, you know, airlines will actually be imposing that, and so on. So how we travel essentially is actually going to change fundamentally, you know, moving forward from now on.
Clive, I'm going to come to you in a minute on the next point, but I've got two questions that have come in that I'm going to start with Anna, then go to Lee, and then we'll move across. First question has come in from Helen Galanders. Hello, H, lovely to hear from you. The question is, are you working with the travel policy owner to update it with new processes that now cover duty of care and safety? And then there's a follow-up question, which is in and around whether travel managers are working with the full supply chain to ensure that the changes made to policy that suppliers can actually meet. And the examples quoted: food offerings in hotels, testing before boarding aircraft, etc. Again, I'll start with Anna then I'll go to Lee, and then Clive, I will come to you for observations. Anna, please.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's you're taking, you know, the role of travel in this is sort of been highlighted, and you're working on the policy constantly with the leadership team, and you bring in all the different departments in a lot more than you may have normally done. So you are looking with HR, you are looking with all the other departments in terms of how to return it, because it is primarily about employee safety at the moment. It's that duty of care that you've got towards your staff is the most important thing.
Lee, can you come in at this point? And obviously, I know directly, but how do you see this at the moment?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things that's become apparent from this is I think that travel has become more important in a lot of companies. Suddenly it's getting recognition where maybe it didn't before. And I think also you're seeing travel departments work a lot more closely with security, health and safety. And I think that as a longer term game in this, then that's a really good thing. And I think that will continue once those relationships are built. I think they will carry on. It's a great point about the supply chain. We've always been in this situation, right? If a hotel, you know, a hotel abides by a certain code, whether that's around cleanliness or whatever it might be, you are reliant on them marking their own homework. And is that good enough in the future? Well, we need to go a bit further than that. So I think that's a really, really key point also. I've made the point many times, you know, a hotel chain or a TMC network is only as good as its weakest link. You just need one of those partners to fail or do the wrong thing, and it reflects on the rest of the brand. And so I do think everybody's going to have to think about this really, really seriously. And obviously the same is true for the airlines as well. And we've already seen that. Everyone, I don't know if it's lockdown, but people just seem to be so quick to give other people a hard time right now. You know, I saw some comments the other day of someone going to have their vaccine and saying that they had a really bad painful arm and they were feeling a bit sick. And I'm like, why are you posting this? Well, you're not serving a purpose. You're just being negative about it all. And that's it. Every time someone does something against the rules, you negate the 99.9% of people that are doing the right thing. But that's what we need to protect against.
Okay. Can I bring Clive now at this point? Is what you've heard from Anna and from Lee, is that mirroring what you're hearing at the BTA?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I think it's very difficult when we still don't know what the outcome of this situation is. And there's a lot of people making assumptions around what's needed, quite rightly, but are they going to be what's right? So, you know, when we're looking at the whole customer journey as part of what we're doing, and I think that's really important, and not only from a COVID point of view, but I think, you know, just generally what the travel moving forward, and people have mentioned sustainability and other things before, and how it blends with video and you know, the whole new way of traveling moving forward. But I think we have to be careful of jumping to any conclusions around what everybody needs until we know what's going to travel. You know, going back to Wayne's point quickly about the health passport, I think, you know, that's a bit of a red herring personally, and I think we need to be very careful around that as to what travel will look like moving forward. You know, vaccine certification is certainly going to be key, but testing is much more important in my opinion, and that of the BTA, to make sure that people are travelling well. So how do we build that into a profile? How, you know, we're looking at things such as the health pass. If that phrase using it, I don't like it, but that's what's called. Is how does the travel management fit into the supply chain of that in terms of managing the corporate? At the moment, it's just an airline tool. So how do we evolve? It was very similar after 9/11, where things changed, and then people come back to traveling and need to get out and travel, and things flatten down and find their level. And quite rightly, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but there's quite a lot of high-end reaction right now about what is needed. And I think we all just need to get around the table and kind of take a little bit of the emotion out of it, which is what Lee is referring to with some of those comments on there, and say actually what is needed and how do we make it safe, and stop building it into quite so much of a drama, because by doing that you're creating even more angst and frustration of people. So I think we just need to be very clear. Let's try and have, as an industry, some really good guidelines around how we move forward through the supply chain, what the expectations are. And please, to any supplier on here, you know, my plea is, now is not the time to be competitive about how clean you are or how safety conscious you are. We need, as an industry, to rebuild confidence for the traveller and the travelling public. And the time for all of that comes when we've got enough people to be fighting over and being competitive against. Right now, we're competitive as an industry against travellers not actually wanting to travel. And I think that is the key thing. We've got to work really hard between now and the April date and May date, when the government come out with those, is to show the industry is pulling as one to create that safe environment. And I think that will be very different.
Okay. Got a question in from Mike Stapley. Hi, Mike. And I'm going to come to Joe first with Mike's question, which is this: whilst we all want to see a return to business travel, are travellers themselves and their partners chomping at the bit or pushing back and being reluctant or refusing to travel? I'll come to Joe first, then to Anna. Joe, your thoughts, please.
Do you know, Clive, you'll enjoy hearing this. I haven't had any traveller pushback. Any inquiry that's come through has not ever cancelled due to fear of arriving into either the country or into any kind of accommodation that we've been booking. So I think you're absolutely right, Clive and Layton, in saying that unfortunately the press is leading the way, sometimes quite negatively, about how COVID is being shared amongst our communities, basically. And I would have it exactly the opposite. We booked a huge amount of travellers, key workers last year, and not one of them ever contacted us and said, I don't want to go because I'm concerned with COVID, or is it clean enough? So I know our supply chain, and go back to the management of suppliers, absolutely has really stepped up and been incredible. And we have had less complaints during COVID than what we did at any other time during my sort of like 17 years in the industry. We have not had complaints about how suppliers have reacted. The one thing that's actually changed, and which and Mike is a really good question, we have so many more pre-questions, pre-booking and pre-travel, which is just about what the services are that's in place now, because people can't go out and do what they normally do. They can't sort of like relocate and then localise. They're having to basically understand what they're going into, and that is absolutely fine. That's where the TMCs or the RMCs and the agents, service point booking agents, are actually adding value. So to the point where now the question is, which is quite interesting, is not where is the local shop, but can I get a local delivery, and can that be organised by the supply chain? And I think that's quite interesting for us. That's actually become quite a priority. The second thing is someone going to come in and clean my room or my apartment, or can I self-clean? That's been a question. If people, like you say, if there's a spouse travelling, Mike, a lot of spouses are saying, do you know what, I'm in the apartment anyway, seriously, I'll clean it, don't send anyone in. So that's been quite prevalent. And I also think understanding outside spaces. So if someone is a smoker, they're desperately going to need a balcony if they can't go out for 10 days. So, you know, you can say they shouldn't smoke, but at the end of the day, you know, so it's what calms a lot of people down. You can't, you know, we can't manage everybody. But I think that's been interesting. And also understanding pre-arrival what the Wi-Fi is like. Because if you've got to stay inside for 10 days, you can't do anything. You're going to want to stream some movies, etc. So those things have become what people are worried about more than the cleaning, and more about the safety. They're more worried about how the things that they're going to touch in the apartment, how are they set up before they arrive. So I definitely think RMCs, TMCs and agents, as well as suppliers, have got a role to play in creating that positive experience when people are travelling around. But I haven't had anyone push back at all.
Okay. Anna, are you seeing that from any Hilti travellers at all, taking on board, obviously, that you don't have any international travel at the moment?
No, so I mean, it's a hard question to answer, really, because there will be people that will be happy to do it and wanting to do it. There will be people that won't want to do it, but then we're not asking those. We're not asking anybody that you have to travel. They travel because they choose to do so, and they see their potential need for it. Otherwise, if they preferred to do a meeting virtually, then by all means they could do that virtually. So it's really difficult to answer, but I completely agree with what Joe is saying, and also what Clive said. It's all about coming together as suppliers to give as much information as possible to that traveller, and actually understanding that, how Joe said it perfectly, their needs have actually really changed. You know, it's a case of, you know, not where can I go, but will I be able to get something delivered in the room, rather than, you know, will I be able to have my breakfast in the room? We've had questions of, if I want to have breakfast in my room, can I expense that, and so on, because obviously there's an additional cost. So their needs on the travel have changed, and we need to to provide them with as much information. And it's sort of all those suppliers coming together and providing that information. So one thing that we've had, for example, we've seen that people have preferred to, and this is something we've discussed with Clive quite a bit, our account managers who would normally go somewhere by train actually are now preferring to drive, stay overnight in a hotel and then drive back. Whereas normally they'd have got a train there and back in the same day. And that is completely fine for us, because if that is what they feel more comfortable with, then that is what, you know, what they can do. So the needs and how travel is actually carried out is what has changed. Whether people are happy or not, you can't have an answer for everybody.
Okay, I'm going to need to step up the pace, I'm afraid, because we're getting plenty of questions in, and we're still on topic 1 of 6. The question which I'm going to put to you, Lee, comes from Tony McGettrick. Thanks for this, Tony. Is there any evidence to suggest the unexpected travel savings achieved during lockdown by companies have focused finance directors to reduce travel in the future?
Oh, how lovely to hear from Magoo. Fantastic. Yeah, so absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. I was going to say this earlier. I had someone in my previous employment come to me from the finance side of the business and say, this travel ban we have is making a fantastic difference to our bottom line. Can we extend it? And like, you do realise that the travel ban is there for pandemic reasons, not for financial reasons. But that was absolutely their view. So Anna's kind of alluded to this as well. Talking to peers and so on, everybody I've spoken to is talking of travel budgets being in the region of 50% of what they were for 2019. That seems to be a pretty key figure. And so, yeah, absolutely, that's focused minds. And I've got to be honest, even speaking personally, of the business trips I've done in the past, how many of them were absolutely critical and absolutely essential? I used to manage somebody in New York and I managed somebody in Hong Kong, and I used to like to go and see them once a year because I find it easier to manage them having that annual face-to-face meeting. But actually, was that the best return on investment for my money? I honestly, hand on heart, I can't say it was. So I just think we'll see, I know this is another question, but I think we'll see non-essential business travel absolutely plummet. And that budget that is remaining will be used for that travel that's going to present some kind of return.
Clive, can I get a quick answer from you on this? Because I want to then stay with you and talk about corporate governance.
Yeah, I mean, I think clearly it will have an impact, but I also see the finance directors, when you look around companies from SMEs right the way through, that there will be a different view. There's a tipping point where the saving actually impacts on the company's growth. And when that point comes, there will be some decisions made that you need to get back to be spending. And it will depend on both the industry and the type of company that you are. But I think the biggest impact will be on internal travel, which is the kind of the conversation Lee was just having there. But it has got an impact. But I think, we will see critical creep, as I call it, where it's only critical travel, and that what becomes critical creeps to being a little bit more as we come out of this. And we will return to some level somewhat higher in that in time. But certainly in the next 12 months, the figures Lee is talking about, I would agree with.
Okay, and staying with you, Clive, what corporate governance do you think is going to be required to support and enable a recovery?
I think, we talked quite a lot about it already in terms of what's needed. I think, it's good for our industry, the travel management industry, is that the governance of making sure that it's booked through someone who's managing the whole process. I think the relationship that will be between the travel management company and buyers and travelers will need to evolve and change, and I think that's a good thing. And I think there's a way to go yet for us as an industry to get to that point. But I think things are important around duty of care, being never more important, and sustainability, and how do you manage those. So will the sign off go higher within a company? That's probably for Lee and Anna to comment more so, but I think it falls on a third party to make sure that governance is being followed, and that the individual, and this is what pleases me as a bit of an old duffer, is that the human being is coming back to be the centre of all of this. Is where I started in my career a zillion years ago. That's the most important thing, and that's the traveller. It's the biggest asset that these companies have got on here, and without being rude, we'd sometimes lost that when it came to travel, I think, and it was just a job that was done. So I think the governance around looking after the best asset of any company is hugely important, and a positive thing that will come out of this nightmare.
Okay, Anna, and then I'll come to Joe. How much of a challenge do you believe the governance element is?
I'm just looking at it. I think we've got quite well behaved travellers. So, you know, for me, the most important thing right now is if they're booking, do it through the right channels, because I want to know where everybody is at all times. Because, you know, just as we were talking about before this call, you know, there might be a localized outbreak in a certain area, or something might happen. And I think, you know, hotels can open and can close and so on. So making sure that they're booking through the right channels to look at that risk management, you know, and that is what our duty of care is. And that is what I always push back with and say is, as long as you're booking through the right channels, we know that the suppliers that we have on there, the traveller tracking and so on, that's all in place there, and it's in place there for a reason. It's in place there to protect you. So that's, yeah.
Okay, Joe, got to bring you in here, but I'd also like to put another question to you while you're commenting on that. How much of a threat to our sector is remote working in the long term?
Okay, I'm going to answer the first one, and then if you don't mind, then come back. For me, I think, Anna, you're absolutely right, and Clive, you're right. We've actually learned, though, this is the weirdest thing for humans, actually, who always fight against any rules and regulations. The one thing we've learned in the last year is how to comply, and compliance has become quite painful for a lot of us, because a lot of us do like to break rules wherever we possibly can, and now we haven't, because we've become community. So community has become how we have actually learned how to comply, and I think that opportunity now for CFOs and CEOs is just so huge, because never before has the workforce experienced the controls that we've personally experienced. So therefore it's a massive opportunity, isn't it? I think one of the questions I saw just pop up, one of the things now is that this is an opportunity for companies to back some of the reins and the controls and stop, obviously from a travel buyer perspective, it could actually stop an awful lot more leakage. Because if you don't comply, you might not get, you know, there's different controls now that can come into play. So I absolutely believe that governance is now going to become so important due to opportunities for compliance measures to increase. So I don't personally foresee a free fall back into what was our normal demand. I think it's going to be a far more measured approach from the corporates, and that's what I'm seeing already, is people trying to measure their return. And Anna, you've just said that as well. The other question, Mark, about I don't know if anyone was watching or probably been looking on LinkedIn, but there's a couple of companies that have gone out with something even just today. Goldman Sachs was saying that they actually have noted they expect to return to office as part of their future culture. So whatever your culture was previously, it's changed obviously now during pandemic, and will change again as we come out. And they're saying that they are planning to go back to the office, which I think is fabulous. I think it's absolutely a necessity for some teams. And I do think that will start a recovery confidence to meet people and be in the workplace, which is what we need people to be doing in order to create that demand again for our travel supply. So so I do think big companies, Goldman Sachs, I think Barclays and JP Morgan came out a couple of weeks and said they expect to return to their office. So, you know, we are going to be reliant on how these massive corporates decide to bring their companies out. Tech companies, interestingly, if their employers don't want to come back to the office, they've been saying that if they want to work from home, if they're in a secondary location, they might consider a lower package for people that work from home. So that might make people run back in to the office quite quickly. If you say, if you work from home, what's been the benefit? And is that a benefit in kind? Therefore, do we need to relook at your packages? So I think a lot of people have had a pay increase, which is equal to their travel costs, and had lifestyle changes equal to 3 hours extra in their day. So companies probably will look at that and say, you know, if you're not doing that, is there a chance to reduce? If you want to stay working from home, is there a chance to reduce that? So that is all, it's like percolating around on LinkedIn at the moment.
But I think that returning to the office is the first step towards getting back to travel.
Normality, yeah.
Because it's the first step of getting back to be amongst your peers and amongst your colleagues, being around people, really. before you then, but at least these are people that you know, before you then jump on a plane with 200, 300, 400 other people that you don't know. So it's introducing small steps of normality back. And that's why I think it is key. And you can't say to people, you've got to go out and travel, but we don't think it's safe enough for you to come to your office, to the office. What does that say, about your offices?
We've got a question coming from Richard Morse. Thanks for this, Richard. Question is to all panelists, and I'll start with Lee. Given reduced travel budgets, do you anticipate a significant reduction in overall travel or an increased shift to low-cost carriers and economy hotels? Lee, your thoughts there, please.
Yeah, hi, Rich. Yeah, I think it's a bit of each, to be honest with you. So there will be less travel. As I said, the travel will be limited to those that are essential travel, and where there's going to be a return. But then at the same time, those people that have got budget for travelling are going to want to make it stretch as far as they possibly can. And so therefore, I think there's going to be a move towards potentially, dropping down the ladder in terms of the quality of the hotel that people stay at, and potentially look also at the class of travel, whether that's on a train or a plane or whatever. But yeah, I think the answer to that is going to be both.
Does everyone else concur with that? Feel free to chip in, please.
To a certain extent, though, but the reason, I'm just thinking about ourselves. The reason why we have those hotels and that class of travel is because we've always thought about keeping our employees happy, safe, and so on. So if you've got a long haul trip and it's business class, it's so that they arrive rested. So we've always thought about their well-being. So their well-being is going to be just as, if not even more important. So I wouldn't look at saying you're going to stay in a lower class of hotel or you're going to fly economy class. What I would probably do is to say, especially for things like internal meetings, if you've got 4 internal meetings a year, can you now look at maybe doing 2 or 3 of them remotely, sort of mixing it up that way? I would rather do that than take away their, let's say their budget, or they're reducing a city cap or something like that.
Okay, can I bring in either Joe or Clive on this? Clive, please.
Can I just add, I think, there's a wider debate here as well that we forget about, is that a small matter of Brexit happened in the middle of all of this, and Britain has an absolute passion of becoming a global power again, according to Boris, and there are trade deals being signed all over the world. So there are UK corporates of all shapes and sizes that have got to go out there and grab that opportunity. One, to make use of those trade deals and sign those relationships in countries far and flung from where we are now. And equally, Brexit, they've got to go and secure those relationships up and work really hard. So, I think there are, what everybody else has said is absolutely true, but there is also this huge point of recovery, both for the country and our economy, as well as corporates, that there is a much wider market to go after. Now, will they, possibly slip back in from business class to premium economy or whatever? I think there may be some move that, but I also agree with Anna. It actually maybe could go the other way in terms of making sure people are well looked after and have their space. And if you're going out, you're going to maybe tie 6 or 7 meetings together, where maybe you did 3 trips or 2 meetings before, and you upscale the way that you travel. All of this is unknown right now, but what is important is that there is still huge opportunity, and the only way of getting out and building something, to rescue something, to build a relationship, is really doing it on point and in front of someone, and that is going to be critical to keep us all moving. And so I think there will be a return to travel, more so than maybe some think. Okay. Maybe I'm just an optimist.
I want to get through all the questions, and we've still got a few topics left to go. So a brief observation from yourself on this, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I basically agree with everyone else. I think CFOs are already setting savings budgets. Now, I'd rather there be a saving budget than no travel. So it's like, if there's, an opportunity to go into lower grade accommodation, if that's what's required to save money, then I think that's, that allows us to have more defined choices, maybe lower rated choices, but still travel happening. And I think that there'll be more opportunity for people to actually start negotiating on rates, etc. But I do think, I think CFOs are already looking for savings budgets to be more creative from their teams, and slicing and dicing the data they've had for the last 2 years We've actually done that for a couple of companies recently. And we can see that when we translate that data, you can make savings just through some changes of how you do it. It doesn't necessarily impact on the traveller or the company or even the supplier, just being sensible with the changes that are made.
Okay, so our next question comes from Bill Hanfrey, and it's to all panelists. Thanks for this, Bill. Pre-trip approval has often been dismissed in the past due to instant purchase air tickets and fares expiring by the time approval for a trip was given. Does the panel think the pre-trip approval process can be better utilised? And if so, what do the TMCs and OBTs or even expense management solutions need to do better? Anna, can I start with you, please?
Well, hi, Bill, my fellow panelist, normally. Where are you? So pre-trip approval is something that we're using at the moment a lot more than what we did, and that is how we're making sure that those trips are absolutely critical at the moment. The way that it can, the way that they can be done better is just simply, I mean, I'm just looking from my perspective, is making sure that you're capturing the right information when you and actually you're able to report on that, so that you're seeing why. The thing that we talked about before is not just traveling for the sake of traveling, but why are you traveling? Who are you going to see, and what do you expect the outcome to be, or what do you want the outcome of that trip to be? So just having not just a tick box exercise, sorry, it's more to actually be a tool to be used to look into.
Okay, anybody else like to come in with thoughts on this?
I think it's really interesting one, Bill, actually, the point around this, because I think we have to evolve this slightly. So I was really pleased to see British Airways came out yesterday with flexible fares. So that is going to be key to this moving forward. And I think we need to change from pre-trip approval to something like pre-trip positivity. So that encompasses that, one, the traveller is happy with everything that's been organised for them, that they've got everything, including their vaccination, sorted out, the corporate governance is covered off, and the price and flexibility is right for the finance people. And I think it's a change of approach that is really important as we move forward, that it is, it's not just the approval of the finance people around this, it's as I say, it's the wider community, that everybody feels comfortable about the trip. So maybe it's a pre-trip comfort check, I don't know, or whatever it is, but I think there's an opportunity for the industry to change that. And I think a real opportunity for organisations such as Bill represents to be at the forefront of that, along with TMCs, to make that part of the journey one of the real key things of getting the confidence back for people travelling. Because I see it as a bit of a negative thing as an ex-traveller, where it's like, oh, I've got to check that I'm doing the right thing and I've not spent too much money. But it could actually be flipped and become a really important tool in getting people back travelling and feeling comfortable about it.
I really agree with that, Clive, yeah.
Lee, can I bring you in, get your thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I was wondering if Bill had any expense management systems in mind when he asked that question. I think there's not too much emphasis on pre-trip, but to me there's kind of like two trip approvals, right? I would never ever just book a trip without going to my line manager and saying, I'm thinking of booking a trip and going there, what do you think? To see whether it's realistic or not. And I don't think people do that enough. They rely on a formal process rather than that common sense question first. And then my preference on this is a bit different, is that I would prefer to have pre-trip approval. Purely from a travel manager's perspective, otherwise you get that situation where someone books a trip and then the manager of that person comes to you and says, why the hell did you let them book that trip? It was £7,000. Why wasn't there a check in place? So, you have to see it from both sides of the fence. Okay.
Mark, can I just come in there? I personally think this is a massive opportunity for the travel buyers to actually enhance their program development moving forward. I really do, because I think there's freedom versus necessity. So you need to travel, or you've got the freedom to book. But I think if travel buyers now really step into that space of enhancing their program development and going back, just retracing back the steps and looking to see if they need more defined choices and more negotiated rates, that would help. What Bill's talking about is the online booking would be more successful, so long as people aren't just buying the market rate, or they're staying within program with the preferred supply chain that's already in place. So I think there'll be less leakage moving forward if the programs become a little bit more defined to specialist providers that are required.
Anybody want to come back on any point there? Okay, well, we'll move on to the next question. And I'm going to start with Clive here. Earlier on, we talked, and I think some statistics were quoted as to the possible size of reductions in travel budgets going forward. But as you highlighted, there's a massive impact there in terms of the degree to which corporate objectives can be realised. What do you actually see the impacts being that if budgets are reduced, just how much are businesses handicapping themselves?
Well, I mean, I think that's for each business to talk for themselves. But I think the world has revolves around human interaction and the need to go out and visit people, and that bizarrely, this is just Clive's view, not that of the BTA, so to add that the longer this thing goes on, the actual more helpful it is of getting people going out back and traveling again, because it's really feeling that there is this pent up demand around getting out there. So I think there is a real risk for companies here in the UK if we don't get out and visit clients and use those opportunities that have been presented on the new trade deals and stuff such as that our competitors will, and that will be detrimental to all of us. So I absolutely agree there will be a cut in travel, but it has to be balanced against the return on investment of going to travel. And we as the BTA many years ago talked about travel being an investment as opposed to a cost, because that's what you're doing. You're investing in your business and your people in doing so, and it's about finding that right balance. And this industry has been through many scenarios such as this, but not quite as deep as this, and there is generally a recovery. It's hard to tell if that will happen, and it's not going to happen quickly, but there is a point that we've got to get back out there, travel responsibly and safely, and manage within the levels that we've got. The short-term issue, why it may not return, is that you might not be able to have the schedules available, the rooms available. Airlines won't have the capacity because they've shrunk. So it's all got to run together at the same pace to grow, and that's why some of the capacity constraints will be there just physically, because you can't get to the destinations that you want to in the first instance. So when we get that right, and the revenue management guys in hotels and airlines get it right and the price right, we'll start to see it flood back, and that's then companies seeing it as a return on their investment and an investment in their growth.
Anna, we were talking a little bit earlier about the Prime Minister has obviously announced his roadmap with some dates, and whether that is or not a good idea. How much of a challenge do you see the uncertainty around whether these dates can be achieved as impacting the speed at which this sector recovers?
Well, like we were saying before, I think, and especially in this sector, we've kind of got used to knowing that actually let's not look at the dates. Let's look at the first date that's coming up, and then the others. Let's see what impact that first day has, and then see how we're going to achieve the next dates. It's, let's use this time to actually, like we were talking about before and what Bill alluded to, let's make sure that we're actually using this time to get ourselves really ready to travel and do it the right way when we can. Let's not look at the fact that we're going to be traveling from the 17th of May. I'm not all of a sudden going to have a huge influx of requests for the 18th of May for our travellers to get back. We need to put those systems in place for when it comes back, and I don't think it would, and people are becoming a little bit skeptical around the dates, I think. So let's make sure that when it does come back, and I don't think it will be a huge wave necessarily, I think it will start to trickle, and then like we're talking about, well, actually I had this experience and it went quite well, and actually okay, so getting that comfort, and the comfort is going to come from people talking. So let's make sure that we've got those things in place, and then we get our people talking and making each other feel comfortable to actually do it and get back to travel. And something we were alluding to before, is it going to be a case of, rather than saying, right, you're traveling or not, are you going to look at, right, this is a required travel, this is a critical travel, or this is a essential travel? This, looking at which one comes first, and then moves down those scales, and till we get back to normal. But I don't think that we're going to see that 17th of May, that's it, off we all go.
Yeah, okay.
8th of March and schools going back, that's got to come.
Right, I've got time now for two questions, and I do have two questions from our attendees. So I'm going to put the first one to start with Joe. And the first of these questions is the second one from Tony McGettrick. And Tony asks this: one hopes we are unlikely to face such a devastating impact on our business again. But aside from the impact of not wearing ties, I think he's saying Clive, Lee and myself, what have we learned, and what and how can we be better prepared for future mass travel reductions? Joe, do you want to go first on that, and then I'll come to Clive?
Yeah, I think how to be prepared is actually to ensure that everyone really does pull their programs apart, and actually annually or biannually, depending on how long your contracts are, because I do think it's important that the world changes anyway, quite naturally, with different focuses. Like we've all forgotten Brexit because it just happened while we were all in lockdown. So, but there's so many new opportunities and stuff. So I think actually enhancing your program every couple of years with actually well, I'm going to use Andrew's words here, actionable insights, changing up things, challenging what you normally do, challenging your own status of the program is actually really healthy. So I think for future, and also I think we've got to just service, our industry has got to service the hell out of every traveller that literally gets on a flight, that arrives in a hotel, and everyone's under so many constraints at the moment with reduced servicing, reduced man hours, reduced etc. But the most important thing now is to gain the confidence is knowing that you've got the backup of these amazing providers and suppliers across all parts of our industry. And I think that's maybe just been lost a little bit in translation in the last year. Some of us sort of reduced our services so much that we're not going to gain the confidence until we reinvest back in our companies. We're maybe not going to make money, but reinvest in the service side is what I would say now. Service the hell out of these travellers.
We have 3 minutes to go, so I need a very brief response from Clive and then from Lee. Clive, anything to add to that?
I think is change of the commercial model in the TMC world is one really important thing to make sure sustainability. Rip up your emergency response plan from 68 pages, make it once and forget about budgeting ever again.
Okay, Lee?
I just think, like I said earlier, I think from a corporate perspective, the fact that the travel team are now working much closer with health and safety and other areas of the business is a really positive thing for the future. So we'll learn from that. And I think the TMCs have learned how to scale up and down a lot better and far more quickly than they ever thought possible. And hopefully that's something they'll continue to build into their business continuity plans.
Okay, I have one final question, which is from Sandy Mooring. We've got a very short period, so I need very succinct answers, please, panelists. Sandy asks this: does the panel believe the industry will actively adopt the guidelines in the new ISO 31030 protocols, given the comments regarding the importance of travel risk management? Who wants to take that first? ISO 31030.
That's Lee.
With which, of course, we are all intimately acquainted.
Go for it, Lee.
That's really naughty asking that question, Sandy, and you know why. Yeah, well, I think it's about duty of care for the traveller, right? So, and we've said a couple of times on this call already that that's going to be very, very important going forwards, and only more so. I think travellers more than ever will be reliant on their employees ensuring that when they're travelling, it's done in a safe and secure way. To me, yeah, absolutely, and people should be adopting it. Otherwise, you've got nothing to hang your hat on.
Brief answer, Clive, please.
I mean, I think it's always standards are important, but I think what we have learned from this is that it is just a standard and not the law, and I think we have to work around it to make it fit the current crisis situation. But I think, yeah, absolutely, there is going to be a need for that governance.
Okay, and Anna?
Yeah, I agree as well. I think there is a need for it. I think it's a great thing to show, that you're looking after your travellers and that you are adhering to at least that standard. But I think it's important as well to all pull together, the whole the industry working together, suppliers and buyers, and working together and all doing what we need to achieve those standards.
Joe, final word.
This has been my passion for 20 years. Set minimum safety standards across every, I could do an hour for you on that, but I know I've only got a couple of seconds. But seriously, minimum standards, it just have to be met. And to Clive's point, if we can set a minimum standard for everyone across the globe, we'll hit every target that we're given.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have now run out of time. I'm sure you'd all agree we could spend a huge amount of time talking on this particular topic, but I'm sure you'll join me in thanking Anna, and Joe, Lee and Clive for all their time and their fantastic insights into today's topic. Now, our next webinar takes place for 3 weeks' time, sorry, 2 weeks' time, should I say, where the topic will be the new different, Thursday, the 11th of March. Despite the recent U-turn on workers returning to their offices, many business travellers are itching to get back on the road, as we've been talking about here. COVID has changed the needs of the business traveller, so how should travel managers be retooling their programmes? That's our topic next time. Before you do all disappear, time just to tell you a little bit more and to thank the sponsors for the Urban Living Festival. They are all shown on your screen. We also have superb support from media partners, and if anybody is interested in becoming a sponsor of that event, Katie will gladly take your call or your email. Please get involved in it. Throughout the lockdown, International Hospitality Media has maintained a fantastic presence in the marketplace. We will all be back. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention, and I hope you found it useful. Have a good day.